here, and we should be streaming on Rumble now. Okay.
Little
Yeah,
world.
it's still a bit of a clusterfuck, so it's not all smoothed out. But for everybody listening to it, Sunday, August 4th, 2024 at 12:05 p.m. Eastern time. Sorry for no shows recently. Have been sick as fuck and not nearly as sick today. And with my buddy Tommy, you've been on here once before with Stoli back
Sure.
in December, I think. And so actually, we'll kind of just jump right into what we're talking about yesterday was I was like I don't really care who wins so long as it's free and fair. And you're
Mm,
like I don't necessarily agree with that. And I should have clarified the way I look at it was like being in a fraternity in college, and you're like, all right, well, you have to elect the EC, the executive council, who's going to be
mm,
the president, VP, treasury, and who's going to be in charge of hazing the pledges, blah, blah, blah. And I remember I one time really wanted this one guy to be in charge, but
mm,
like everyone else voted for someone else. And my first gut instinct, I was like 20. I was like, man, fuck them. I'm right. But then I was like, these are all or whoever it was like the guy in control of Treasury was like a party animal. And I just remember thinking, I was like, this is retarded. But then I stopped and I was like, well, everyone in this fraternity is here. It's 30
mm.
people. There's no like election fraud. Everyone here has
Yeah,
a functioning brain. We all have the same real interest, and that is nothing to do with school or any academic achievement. It's how
mm.
many girls can we get to how many parties? How
What really
frequently can we
matters.
do it? And I'm one person, and there are
Mm,
29 other dudes who are all on campus, no different people. And so it dawned on me, I'm like, the hive mind, we all want the same thing. And so if they're all saying that this guy should win overwhelmingly, I have to conclude that maybe I don't have as many data inputs as them. So, like in a vacuum perfect nutshell, that's what I mean when I say as so long as
yeah.
an election is free and fair, I'm okay with whoever wins because it's the largest number of. It's the same reason why a decentralized economy works better than a centralized economy because there's a bunch of
Mm,
nodes
mm.
of people who are taking care of themselves. All that being said, we know it's not free and fair. And we also know that not everyone has access to this. It's not 30 dudes going, how do we get the most number of girls
Yeah,
in our
yeah,
pool? There's, like you said, regardless if it was free and fair, you still have media manipulation. You
yeah,
still have people going, Donald Trump didn't get hit by a bullet. And you're like, what the fuck? Like,
yeah.
and so in that sense,
Yeah, it's tomato sauce, dude.
my idyllic walled Garden of Eden idea.
Mm,
Sure, it looks good in a textbook and maybe works when you're trying to work with 30 other dudes in a fraternity. That all being said, it's all dog shit. We know that's not at all how it goes.
yeah,
And,
yeah.
we're quite literally up against the satanic pedophile. So, with that,
No,
Tommy, how are you,
100%.
how are you doing?
Yeah, dude. Well, we've been living in a world ruled by satanic pedophiles for quite a long time. So it's as good a morning as any, I gotta say. Um, and look, man, I kind of disagree with that idea about democracy on two levels, and I think you kind of mentioned both of them there. But I want to go into each of them.
Yeah.
First of all, about
And by the way,
on a practical level,
I'm
yeah.
posting the live link. I'm not playing with my phone, just so you know.
Oh yeah, no problem. First of all, sort of on a practical level, and then secondly, more on a theoretical level. And if we look at the practical level, the reality of politics is that we've had this image of the American democracy where we have free and fair elections for a long time, where we don't where we respect each other's opinions, where we both sides agree on free speech. But in truth, man, we haven't lived in that world for a long time. All right. The reality is that one side has been, I don't even want to say it's one side or the other, because this is the nature of these things, that if one side steps a little bit across the line and starts to do some unsavory shit and starts to step away from democracy, naturally the other side is going to start doing that too. And then it's going to just continue to legitimate moving away from democracy. And eventually you reach a point where you just have to accept that, this dream that we had back in 1776 of this perfect democracy, the way things are, it just doesn't exist. The other side is not going to play by those rules. Uh, it's just not practical. It's just not real. Okay. You have to play by the rules of the game as you see them, not as you wish that they were.
Sure. That being said, how do you approach that without again, more of it's not an original question. how do you play that? And I agree with you entirely. You have to play. It's the same thing with like you know, all the people that got fired right after the Trump assassination attempt, right?
Mm,
You see people on the right like we're not about cancel culture. And it's like, hey man, it is no longer hyperbole to say they want you dead. The
yeah,
very thing, it's not like, hey, cancel
yeah,
them
yeah,
because they're, you know, whatever, pro child transitioning. They want you dead. It's like, no, no, no. They're telling you the very thing that
yeah,
they're getting canceled for is them upset
yeah,
that you're not dead. And it's
exactly.
like you have people that are like, well, we shouldn't cancel. And it's like, hey man, at a certain point, you have to just like you're on the Titanic, man. Like
Yeah,
it's not it's not right wing misinformation to say like the deck is sliding. At a certain
yeah.
point, you do have to play, like you said, with the rules as you see them. How do you avoid then? And maybe you can't. How do you avoid then becoming the thing you're fighting against?
Well, look, man, I think that you need to have a certain set of values that are above and beyond the political machinations that you, the methods of politics that you do in order to get to those values, as opposed to having those political machinations and political methods being the values themselves, right? I mean, if all that the right is defined as is we care about not canceling people because the left cancels people and we don't want to turn into the left by starting to cancel people. I don't think that defines that's not the entirety of what the right is about. That's not the entirety of what the left is about. Cancellation, just as one example, that's an escalation. That's a level up in the game of war between the two political sides, right? And now that that weapon is on the table that the left has been using against the right for years, for probably over a decade at this point, it doesn't do anything for the right to then go and say, well, we're above that. We're above that. We're not going to be part of that anymore. Because the thing is that that weapon is already out. Either you're going to pick it up and use it or not, right? If you're going to duel with somebody and they pull out a gun, right? You can't sit there and say, you know what, it's good for people to have gun violence, right? I don't think I'm going to shoot back because I just don't really support gun violence. You're already in the gun violence. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's over. All right. You got to play the cards that you're dealt. But you know that's the practical considerations, and how practical that actually gets in practice. You know, I don't know. I mean, things can get out of hand pretty quickly. Look at what's going on in the UK right now. I mean,
Hmm.
it's going to be interesting to follow that for sure. Because eventually, you know, once you start getting away from these democratic norms, these systems that we all kind of agree on that this is the legitimate and proper way for us to have political change in our society, and those stop being legitimated, right? You start moving away from them step by step. They start draining away their legitimacy. Pretty soon, you're going to get into a point where people feel that they have no recourse except to go out into the streets and riot. I mean, we had seen, and it's actually a great example of what's going on in the UK because you do see a lot of this discourse now from lefties on Twitter that are doing the same shit where they're saying, "Oh, look at these white guys. They sure love to complain back in 2020 about Black Lives Matter riots. Oh, but now they're doing the same thing. They're burning down police stations and flipping over cars. Well, the fact is, the tactic is out of the box, right? And you know, the real dark truth of the matter is that the tactic was never really in the box to begin with. You know, political violence has always been real. The democratic facade that we think that we live in this like enlightened world of democracy where the only time that people ever did political violence was way back in the ancient times of, you know, the 1940s or like in the 1960s in Italy, right? Like, oh man, that might as well you might as well be talking about 3000 BC, fucking Old Kingdom Egypt, you know? But no, man, I mean, this moment of this democratic utopianism is exactly that. It's a moment of utopianism we think we believe in, that we think that we live in because we live in a time of incredible economic prosperity. And as that ends, as our social cohesion of our society ends, I think that the democratic uh, utopia, that Mount Olympus that we've posited for ourselves, is coming back down, and it's not real anymore. It's just not going to continue to be real. And the thing is that you know so much of our American national identity is built up around that democracy, and that democracy is falling apart. So you have this weird thing going on in America specifically, where you have American nationalism on one side that's being destroyed by the current regime, right? All the things that make America what it is, and instead we're being divided into all these different groups. Our children are being transitioned in front of us. This ideology this disruptive ideology is just becoming more and more prevalent. And at the same time, it seems like there's not really a way to solve the problem through the current system of democracy. Well, Trump appears to be, a solution. A lot of people on the right are really behind Trump. And we just got to vote, get him democratically elected. But there's a lot of hesitance about that because a lot of people on the right believe that the democratic process doesn't work. That's what we saw in 2020, right? I mean, a lot of people are totally checked out of the democratic process. People say, well, it doesn't even matter what's going on with the polls and the swing states, and the fucking demographics of the 18 to 29-year-old voters, because they're just going to cheat anyway. And so, in a sense, Pandora's box is open for CIA. Pretty damn sad.
Can you come a little closer to your mic? You sound a little distant. I don't know what you're using. I don't know if you can.
Give me like a second. I'm gonna try using my other headphone.
Yeah, you're good. Um, yeah, and that is kind of like it might be that we're just looking at, from like 1950 till now in the same way one day, or in the same way one day we'll look at that the same way we look at like the Pax Romana or something.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, no, it was a wild time and it was objectively good. More people were brought out of poverty and, whatever the fuck, all the TED Talk talking points, and went to the moon and internet and whatever. But, it's a game of musical chairs, really. It's like it's violence has always been there. At any point, I mean, at any point, I can go to my local grocery store. I mean, today, I could go if I wanted. I could go with my handgun and just take whatever I wanted. Probably, maybe I don't know if I'd die there in a shootout, but I would die today. Like it would end today. And if it didn't, it'd be a hell of a manhunt and probably a great podcast. But like that is
live stream that shit.
Yes, exactly. No, I would absolutely get the most clout as I could.
By the way, am I sounding better now with the other headphone in?
I can't. We'll find. We'll know a little bit. It's not important. I can hear you fine. I hope the people that listen can. Regardless, I can edit it afterwards. But that option's always there, right? It's always there's a great book called Command and Control by Eric Schlosser, and it's all about just life in nuclear missile silos. And he talks about how with the fall of the Soviet Union, we had this idea that like that threat was over, like and it was, and because a lot of people, they grew up with the fear of the bomb, duck and cover. And he's like, no, these things are still there and they still work. He's like, the silos are still manned, the fuel is still checked, the guidance systems are still like troubleshooted every day. There are still guys down there behind a bulkhead door. And in about 4 minutes, they can fire those. And in 30 minutes, they can detonate. And then in another 30 minutes, the entire world can be killed by a retaliatory attack at any given moment in any 60-minute or 64-minute block. It can end. But there's this idea that it's not, or that it can't be. And I think, it's like, well, how do you not do it? Well, there's mutual assured destruction. I guess you could almost say like mutual assured prosperity. The reason why there isn't, in my completely uneducated, unexperienced wisdom, it's because it's still in most of our interests to play the game. There are people that are fucked. There are people that get screwed by blue collar, white collar crime. I get it. But the vast majority of us, we're still incentivized to not go shoot up the grocery store because it's a lot less of a thing for me to just take out a plastic debit card and I put it in a machine and then I'm allowed to take food. There's no security check. There's no National Guard outside. For the most part, it's still in all of our interests to play along. And it seems like that interest, we still have the interest, but there are legitimate forces trying to remove that as even a possibility of existence. It doesn't
things
seem
are
to
still
be falling
comfortable.
apart. Yeah.
But, that's the thing that's scary about this inflation that we've been seeing.
With the what? Sorry.
This inflation that we've been seeing. I mean, how much longer are things going to continue to be comfortable? I mean, how far away are we from a world where a lot of the material comforts that we've grown to expect are no longer present? I think that that's going to start causing sort of a cascading impact on people. It's going to be a big problem if things continue to get worse. On the point about the nuclear weapons, man, the craziest thing to me is that when we hear from the Russians, who, let's not forget, are still, they're not quite the Soviets. They don't have this global, ambition of bringing communism to the entire world and opposing corrupt capitalism. But they still are opposed to the American global project, which still certainly exists. They're just a little weaker. We defeated the Soviet Union. We didn't defeat them fully. They're still basically around. And they still have a fuckload of nukes. They have more nukes than us. And they definitely have kept their fucking powder dry as far as their ICBMs are concerned. I mean, that much you can say for sure. If there's anything that Russia is doing, they're putting a lot of money into their military. Right?
Yeah.
And so, what I wanted to say is that, look, we might be arguably closer to nuclear war right now than at pretty much any point during the Cold War, with maybe one or two exceptions.
Yeah.
And yet back then it was a conversation about, oh my God, we need to avoid mutually assured
Yeah.
destruction.
You got to
Right?
walk back
We
from the
can't.
edge.
Exactly. But now when Russia says, hey, motherfuckers, we have nukes, our leaders seem to say, look at how evil it is that Russia is talking about nukes. They're doing nuclear saber rattling. Why are you talking about that? That's what we say to Russia. We say that you shouldn't even talk about nukes. No, motherfucker, you are supposed to talk about nukes. We
Yeah.
do need to talk about them. It is real. We're living in this fantasy world where we pretend that nukes exist. And then when our opponent says that we pretend that nukes don't exist, I mean. And when our opponent reminds us that they do, we scold our opponent for reminding us. So not only are we deluding ourselves, but we're deluded enough to scold somebody for daring to possibly break the delusion, right? And it's an insane amount of delusion that we live under. And it's very, very sad. I mean, I've said sad a lot, but it is a sad situation that we're in.
It's sad, sure. I think that's probably like the nicest adjective is like
Yeah.
it is. Yeah, no, it's a distant thing. It's over there. And it's very quick. It's gonna in a moment it could become the most real fucking thing ever.
Yeah. Oh
It's
yeah.
just like, can you imagine their saber rattling? Well, it happened in 45 and it would never happen again. It can absolutely happen again. I mean, Able Arch, I mean, we know Berlin airlift, and Cuban
Mm.
Missile Crisis, but Able Archer was this war game in I think 1983, and it was where it was like the biggest Cold War like Al or NATO war game, and I think it was in Poland. It might have been near Ukraine. I don't remember. I think Poland. We'll just say Poland, and the Soviets looked at it and they were like, "This is not a war game. They're putting it's under the illusion of a war game." But we know what they're going to do. And the Soviets are like, it's a very nice tactic, but we see through it. You guys are doing a big old war game, and it'd be like I don't know. It'd be like if there was I don't know, like a military march outside of
Right.
like Mar-a-Lago or something.
Yeah.
Trump would probably be like
Yeah.
keeping an eye on that and be
Yeah.
like, is this really a bunch of sailors with the white gloves marching, or is this about to turn into a fucking raid? And
Yeah.
so naturally they went on high nuclear alert, and obviously we avoid, and it really wasn't an operation. It really was just a war game. We were just fucking dumb enough to walk over there and be like, let's do it right here. And
Mm.
yeah, the Soviets almost counteracted. It was like their Cuban Missile Crisis. And there's like a lot of cables and teletypes like from I guess Soviet archives of them being like, all right, gentlemen, like this is it was an honor serving with you. And we had no idea. We were like, what are you talking about? This is just like a NATO war game, bunch of dudes who don't want to be there. But the Soviets were like, this is as real as it gets. So my point is that was with something where we openly said it was a war game. The Soviets had their reservations, but at the very least, we were saying it was a war game, and it was a war game. But the takeaway is we were saying this is a
Yeah.
war game. We are now even closer to their border.
Yeah.
We're not saying it's a war game. We're openly sending war material, missiles and
Yep.
HIMARS and jets, and we're openly coming out and saying, they are warmongering animals and
Enemies of
sloppy.
democracy.
So if Able Archer in 83 was a real fucking issue, what is this?
Yeah. Yeah.
This is
Yeah.
this is me being at the edge of your property, just waving to you, going,
Yep.
I know you're in there and you're going, Tommy's being really weird about this. And now imagine if I'm like in your kitchen at 2 in the morning breaking dishes. Do you
Yep.
think you're going to be a little more on edge than you were when I was at the edge of your
Well,
fucking property?
yeah, and especially now in the way that the world looks from the American perspective today compared to back in the Soviet Union days. Because back then the Soviet Union was never a larger economy than the United States. Actually, always pretty significantly smaller, especially by the time that you get to 83 and the United States economy is really taking off after the period of the 70s when oil prices were very high and all that. In the 80s, the United States was way ahead of the Soviet Union, but it was never really that close. But now we're in a situation where, yeah, okay, Russia's economy is quite small, but China's economy isn't. And China is very, very clearly on Russia's side here. We're looking at an enemy in Russia and China together that is significantly more powerful on the aggregate than the Soviet Union ever was. China has a larger economy than the United States in purchasing power parity terms. You forget the exchange rate of dollars, which is just money, right? It's just the numerical exchange of money. If you look at the actual amount of things that are produced, the amount that Chinese people can purchase from their grocery stores, on the whole, it's higher than what Americans can. Now, if you're a little more generous to the Chinese and you look at their industrial capacity, it's significantly higher than. Not that the Americans have nothing, um, and we could ramp it up in the case of a war, God forbid. But still, this is a bigger threat than the Soviet. And I think it's one of the funniest, not funniest, but it's one of these little synchronicities of history, these little coincidences, these little poetic justices, right? Where Henry Kissinger seemed to just be undying. The man lived to like what 103 years old,
Yeah.
right? And his whole life's work, right? And when you think of Kissinger, you think of two things. You think of this guy who is okay, a Machiavellian. He was ruthless. He killed a lot of motherfuckers, but at the end of the day, he was really focused.
Yeah.
Really focused. He brought realism and intelligence and ruthlessness to American foreign policy, which is just totally absent from today. And what was he most famous for? What was his life
Break,
accomplishment? It
breaking apart
was
China, Russia.
exactly. And so now he's lived to see our system degenerate into uh, complete morons that are. I mean, if you look at the way Nixon spoke to the American public, with the gravitas that he talked about international relations, said that I'm not. It was so much of a higher level, just erudition than anything that we have today. That has been degraded. Kissinger has lived long enough to see that completely fall apart to the point where we have Kamala Harris saying, "Well, see, Russia is a big country and Ukraine
And
is a little
Ukraine is a
country."
small country.
Yes, and so it's bad that Russia's attacking Ukraine. I mean, it's that level of idiocy that we're living in. And at the same time, on a concrete level, he's also lived to see his life's work get completely obviated, where pulling China away from Russia has completely been undone, and now Russia is pulled in with China. Mearsheimer has been saying for years, if not decades, we need to be friendly with Russia in opposition to China. That would be good strategy. That would be realist strategy. That would be understanding that we have interests in this world. Other powers have interests in this world. Other powers have certain levels to us. We need to take that. We need to figure out what we can do. But instead of that, there's no conversation about accepting that somebody else. Instead, it's a conversation entirely about bullshit ideals, right? Well, we support democracy. China is bad because they're not Democrats. It reminds me of, I think it's something very masculine and feminine, where I think that when two men, look, Tommy, you and I right now, we're 1,000 miles away or whatever. We're separated by a screen right now. But in any conversation between two men that are in person, ultimately, if you and I started to get into an argument, there's always an understanding that it might come down to a physical fight. You know, we have that appreciation. This is something Jordan Peterson talks about, actually, that men always understand that there is a underlying substrate of a possibility of a fight between the two men, and so that forces them to be realist in the way that they argue,
Hmm.
right? And so you have to appreciate what's my strength, what's the strength of my interlocutor, what would happen in a fight? Who are our allies here? Who are our enemies? You know, we have to think about those things, and then from there we can try to get to the truth of the matter. But I think when with women, you know, and this is not a bad thing. I love women. This is just how they are. When two women are especially when a woman and a man are having a discussion, the question of a physical altercation has no legitimacy. It's not part of the question. If the man dares to, you know, if there's a physical altercation, you're in a whole nother, that's just completely wrong. It shouldn't even happen. It's not part of the calculation. The man should never fight with the woman, right? And women will never really fight with each other physically in that way either. So instead of having that physical basis for the conversation that everything is grounded on, it's sort of a box that everything is in. Instead, you can kind of go anywhere with the conversation. You can bring in whatever ideals. If somebody is wrong, if something is unjust, if something is unfair, that's a universe, you know. That is something that can just be brought in, and then you just scold the other person with it. And I don't mean to just say this is how women are in general. This is just a general sort of masculine versus feminine principle. And I think that we've moved away from a masculine principle of international relations to a very, very feminine principle. And it's a big issue, a real big issue. Because the nukes are not masculine or feminine. They don't.
I would say if I had to play devil's advocate,
Hmm.
you could argue, and I don't really believe this, but for the sake of it, you could argue that that is like a step forward as to arguing a point where physical altercation is not that underlying substrate. Now, let me
Hmm.
immediately cover that and go, that's retarded because all it ever takes is somebody going, "Oh, you're not preparing for war." Well, then I'll
Yeah.
prepare for war.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's I'm never gonna break into someone else's home. Yeah, but not everyone has that agreement, so you have to have a padlock on your door. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So, I mean, just as not even really, just as an aside, you could argue, that is like a level of, that is a level of like you could almost argue progress. Like, hey, we're not gonna kill each other if we disagree, but that doesn't work because not the entire world isn't on the same footing. Not
Yeah.
everyone has cheap and easy access to food, water, and shelter. And if we're not preparing for war, someone else is. So it's always
Yeah.
better to be peaceful but prepared than vice versa. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, that does, and I mean, per Kissinger, you know, but that's also all of history, seeing your own
Yeah.
work undone. And again, not really an important, that's just what my mind gravitated
Hmm.
towards. But like I tend to try to look at this and I always wonder like, I always think of it with like special access program technology, Area 51. I always joke like, man, I like if I was on my deathbed, I wish I could just like say goodbye to my family and everyone that loves me, and I'd be like, take me in Area 51, show me what we have, and then kill me. Like, but just I just want to see. I'm not judging.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna pull some high horse, be like, this technology could save the like yeah, that's all well and good. I get it. Just show me the warp drive, just out of
Hmm.
curiosity. I think about that too with like current US policy. Regardless of like moral rights and wrong, and should we be bombing kids, and should we spend less money on aircraft carriers and more on yeah, whatever. Just okay, yeah, fuck all that. Just bring me to a skiff. And I just want to know like what's the real tactic? Like why are we doing it? Are they all retarded? Or is there something? And I tend to think that I I think we're letting this one get a little out of control
Hmm.
because we want it to
Interesting.
get a little out of control
Hmm.
because we're no longer at a point where we can even feign that we're going to pay off the debt. That's what I
And
really think.
yeah. Okay.
We're
Interesting
letting
point.
it get a little, we're letting it get a little because what happens normally, right? A country comes out and goes, we're not using the petrodollar anymore. Oh, you need freedom, and then we, drag your leader out and there's the kid off. You got raped with a sword. Like,
Yeah.
but now they're openly talking about bricks, and we're just like
Yep.
not saying anything.
Saudi
Isn't that kind
Arabia
of
is,
isn't that kind of weird?
moving away.
It's like
Yeah.
not saying anything. Is a white man can't jump, or that some dude in the movie that he gets like fucking embarrassed on the basketball court, and he just looks at everyone and he goes, "I'll be right back," and he leaves, and everyone goes, "He's going to get a gun," and like everyone runs. That's
Hmm.
what it kind of feels like right now. Is the U.S. normally immediately punches you at the bar. If you say I'm not using the petrodollar, we strike almost immediately. But they've been talking about bricks for several
Yeah,
years, and we're just like, huh? Well, you know what? They are. That's a separate current. It's like
yeah.
it's kind of weird, and it's that's weird. And
So there's two
now,
hypotheses, right?
yeah,
Like
I don't
on the
really know
one
where I'm
hand,
going with that
no,
point. You
no,
can
no.
take it
This is
wherever
interesting.
direction.
There's two hypotheses, right? I think a lot of people that are, anti-establishment, dissident, whatever, would have these. This is a big debate that's happening, right? There's two hypotheses. Either a hypothesis A, the ruling elites are actually that stupid.
Yeah,
They actually have drank their own Kool-Aid.
yeah.
They really do believe that we live in 2024.
That it's
Gays should be
1990
allowed to get
America.
married. I
Yeah,
mean, Russia needs to be destroyed because they don't have gay marriage. Like they actually believe this shit that they say, which is what they are saying in the overall, in the regime media, right? If I'm not mistaken, in most of it anyway, in the left leaning, mainstream media, which is just all of the mainstream media. They do talk this way. They talk about how China is, how we need to uh, turn China into a democracy, just like we've been saying for decades. Of course, it seems more and more impossible, but it seems like we keep talking that way. We keep talking down to them and scolding them and saying things. So if we could actually go into the skiff and see how things are, my gut feeling is actually with that hypothesis that actually they are that stupid. That in reality there are just the idiotic bureaucrats and the sycophants have just worked their way up to the top, and the people like Kissinger, the real cigar smoking guys in the smoke filled rooms that are pulling the strings, all of a sudden woke up one morning and realized that they couldn't log into their computer. They'd been fired by the retard bureaucrats. And I think that it's possible that that's the way things are. And then there's the
yeah.
second hypothesis, and that's what you're saying, that actually two groups in charge of the deep state. There's one group of useful idiots who will push all of this, this idiotic rhetoric. They're moving us towards war, and uh, that's getting the population riled up. That's causing all these problems that are happening. And then there's a group of people that are pulling the strings in behind that are actually competent, that are actually realists, right? That are interfacing with truth, but they, for some purpose, are remaining hidden, letting the useful idiots drag us to war because they want war. And that to them is their calculation that the best way to get to a war, which is the best way to deal with our debt problem and the failure of the impending failure of the dollar world economy, would be to let the idiots run the show, drag us into a war, out of it. And I hesitate to think that that's true, because what possible incentive would they have to have a war that ends up destroying the international system? If these people are, American patriots, if at the end of the day they care about, making them not American patriots, but if at the end of the day their money is tied up in the American system
Yeah,
and they want, not what's best for America, but certainly what's best for them, which is in America, right?
a
Then they
realistic
wouldn't want to war.
patriotism.
Yeah. But if they are total internationalists and they don't care whether they're in New York or Zurich or Hong Kong or Cape Town or wherever, at the same time they wouldn't want this globalized international world to fall apart. It seems to me that a world war would be the fastest way to get everybody to regress back to, tribalism, nationalism, imperialism, instead of this global system of values that we have today. So I don't know if it's true. I mean, I wonder what is your, obviously I don't know. I mean,
Yeah, I don't. I mean,
what do you think about those two hypotheses? Where are you in?
one, so yeah, the whole. I think there's like patriotism and that like you love your country, and then there's like a pragmatic patriotism where it's like that's where all my money and property is, and
Mm,
and
yeah,
technically I
that's what
still
I
got.
mean
Yeah, yeah,
specifically. I
yeah,
have no illusions that they're
yeah. No, I
sitting
get
there
you.
reading the Star Spangled Banner lyrics.
Yeah, yeah, no, I get you. And if anything, though, the former is almost a little more realistic because they're,
Mm,
if your life's threatened, you might go, yeah, I'm not really patriotic. Versus your life, if your life's threatened, but you got $1 trillion tied up, you might be like, fuck it, we ball. Like,
yeah.
so I don't know. I look at, that's not nothing to have your money tied up there. And I tend to look at I had one guy on my show, I have him on all the time, Clay Martin, former SF guy, and he said it once, and I agreed with him. Again, something I've always thought. I tend to think a lot of these people love the United States
Mm,
because of its just strategic location. Despite like modern technology and Uber Eats and flat screen TVs. I sound like a boomer. And the internet,
yeah.
you're surfing the net with your Nintendo 64s. Like we do still live in a physical world, and the United
Mm,
States is full of resources.
oh yeah,
And aside from the frozen tundra to the north and the land to the south that at one point is kind of bottlenecked, we are separated by two
yeah,
oceans. It's not a
yeah,
bad place to build your fort. So I tend to think
sure,
a
yeah,
lot of them do actually like the US simply for that. You look at someone like Elon Musk, his rockets, his entire industry, his dream it
yeah,
it it is only possible through the United States. So I think a lot of them do want the U.S. to succeed, even if only for entirely selfish reasons. Now what? So then, how does that jive with a world war that would destroy the international order? I think they would agree with you. I think they would say, no, you're right. It's going to destroy the order, but it might be an option of like it might be an option if I'm on the whatever the top floor of this building. And if the building was on fire and the stairwells were collapsed, I would have to consider jumping and aiming for the trees. And you might go like,
right.
that's pretty retarded. That's gonna break the global order. That's gonna break your femurs. I would agree with you,
The
but
global order of your femurs. Yeah.
I would then show you the
Hallway.
hallway and say it's on fire. I don't like it either, but I
Mm,
do want to keep living. I'm only 33. I do hope to get married and have a family and live most of my
yeah,
life still. I'm gonna jump. I'm not a
you can do
fan
that in
of
a
it.
wheelchair.
Yeah, but I'm gonna jump.
Mm,
I think they're probably looking at this and they're going, "We don't want this." However, we've been running up this credit card at the Federal Reserve for
yeah,
35 trillion. It's getting
yeah,
faster and faster and faster.
yeah,
We were gonna have to do this eventually. We decided this 10 years ago or 20 years ago. And we're gonna strike while the iron's hot because instead, imagine if everything was at peace and we had to start a world war versus you got Russia and Ukraine,
we got
you got
Iran,
you
Israel,
got
Taiwan.
Gaza, Israel, you got China,
Yeah,
Taiwan, you got fucking Venezuela.
Burma,
They're going, hey
Pakistan.
man,
While you're at it.
they're like, hey man, we were hoping to do this in 2030, but fuck it. Like, and so
Mm,
I think there might actually be almost a Kissinger-esque, like, we don't want this either. There is no alternative in a zero-sum world where we don't do this.
yeah, yeah.
It's not a great
You might be
answer, but
right.
I think it is the answer. I have no
You know,
idea.
I think that it's important to realize that ultimately the people that really make the decisions are the people with the most money, right?
Yes.
I think there's no,
Yes.
it should be under no illusions about that. But at the
No.
same time, I think it can be helpful to realize that these people are not necessarily all on the same page. The people that have money, there's different groups there. Now we can always speculate about sort of deeper groups of people that are very hidden from the public eye, but all we have to go off of really are the people who are in the public. Um, and I think that this last month between the from the debate to the assassination attempt to the selection of JD Vance and then the dropping out of Joe Biden and the disappearance of Joe Biden.
Hmm.
Fucking where is he now? And and now Kamala Harris being in charge. I mean, it's been such an interesting one, but I really have been fascinated by Vance in particular because I think Vance, and I might be wrong about this, but this is sort of just my working hypothesis.
I know nothing about him, so everything you say now will be my future arguments to people.
Okay, all
So
right.
choose
Well,
your
no pressure.
words. Choose your word.
I'll do my best.
I'm picking this
Listen,
out.
I already said I might be wrong. I'm just going to say it again, just for insurance purposes. I might be wrong. Okay, this is not financial advice or legal advice or medical advice. It's barely even advice. So I think Vance might represent a a sign of a split in the billionaire class that is happening right now. That there's a different group of billionaires with a different ideology than the ones that are currently in charge of policy and the American media and the direction America is going, who are who have enough independent money and power and political power, especially at this point, to break away and try to take America in a different direction. So almost like a palace coup inside of the billionaire class. Not a coup, but just maybe one faction rising, where the other previously dominant faction now is decrepit and declining. So why I say this is so connected to Vance. Okay, so if you look at JD Vance's career, right? Okay, he's got his little sob story. He was a poor boy from Ohio, went to the Marines, went to Yale. Um, at Yale, he actually went to Yale Law School with Vivek Ramaswamy. They're like best friends. Vivek Ramaswamy, in fact, one of Vance's sons, if you don't know, Vance is married to a Hindu Indian woman, definitely a Brahmin, named Usha, and one of his children that he has with her, he named Vivek, interestingly. So they're very, very close. If you listen to Vivek talk about Vance, he's best friends. They're the same age, both very young. They're like in 39, 40 years old. Vance, after law school, went to Silicon Valley and worked in San Francisco and made money there and became an investor and got quite wealthy. He also wrote his book in 2016, which was quite popular among liberals. His book was basically a big sob story about he was from Appalachia and liberals. He was very popular among liberals. And at that time in 2016, he was not in politics. That's when he made those tweets that people are quite familiar with, where he was saying that Trump is like Hitler and I'm never going to vote for Trump. But he decided to run for Senate in 2022, and Trump was definitely on his side then. Trump, in fact, endorsed him and campaigned for him, and with his help, Vance was able to get elected. And 2 years later, he's running mate. So quite a meteoric rise from no political experience to the Senate only 2 years ago. Right? Always, so he's very much an unknown quantity, politically speaking. If you look into Vance and Ramaswamy and look into some of the businesses that they've run and some of the money that they've received in their life, they're very, very connected to Peter Thiel, right? And Peter Thiel, his whole network, right? Now, Peter Thiel is interesting because despite the fact that he is homosexual, he actually has some very conservative ideas, very anti-liberal ideas, in fact. And he's I believe his one of his professors, and when he was in college, he studied philosophy, was Rene Girard, and he was famously a pupil of Rene Girard's. And Girard had a lot of ideas. I don't want to get too into that, but Girard had a lot of ideas about how media was basically controlling us through democracy, among a lot of other things. So he's very much an anti-liberal type of person. Thiel is. Thiel is also connected to Musk, who of course has been very much a public face of some of anti-wokeism, anti-managerialism, right? If you look at Vivek, he's been talking constantly about James Burnham, right? The managerial revolution. So the thing that I'm trying to say here is that I think that this entire group of people, this Silicon Valley right-wing group within Silicon Valley, right? We normally think of Silicon Valley as being the hub of DEI and wokeism and just techno optimism. Well, I think these people are still techno optimists in some sense, but I think they're also nationalists. They're also a little bit more realistic about questions like race and gender than the current liberal order. And I think they're pretty strongly anti-democratic, right? And I think that they are taking on power through Vance. And through Vance, they have a direct connection to Trump. And again, Trump is very old. I think he's 79. He's not going to be around for very long. Right now, his second in command and his heir apparent is JD Vance. And JD Vance is a creature of Peter Thiel, right? So they're all connected here. This is a very specific group of people now that I think people ought to look into. So all I'm trying to say is that, one other point I should make. Peter Thiel supported Trump in 2016. He's one of the only billionaires to publicly support Trump in 2016. Almost everybody else did not support him. Nowadays, Musk does, and even Zuckerberg has said some positive things about him. But of course, Zuckerberg famously was very anti-Trump in 2020, right?
Mm-hmm.
and suppress the whole laptop situation. And that's a great example of how billionaires through the media control democracy, and democracy is kind of because of that in general, which gives you a lot of credence to this new anti-democratic thing. So I think it's going to be very interesting to watch. I'll say one more thing about the left's response to Vance, right? Vance has had quite a few sort of socially conservative views, right? He's very economically liberal, very anti-Wall Street, very, at least he talks like that. He's very pro-union, talking about how the working man, whether you're part of a union or not, is being screwed over by Wall Street. Almost sounds like a fucking commie. Uh, but he's very socially conservative. In fact, a few years ago, he was talking about people should have more votes if they have more kids, and he quite famously said that women that have no kids are like childless cat ladies that have no stake in the future of the country, which is like a profoundly based thing to say,
Yeah.
actually. And it's funny, but it's really true,
No, it is.
and
No, it's absolutely true.
it's just straight up true, and it's also like cuts right into the heart of liberal individualism, doesn't it? This idea that, oh well, you have to have a stake in the country through being part of the society, being part of the of your conservative social networks, right? Of having children and being part of a family and part of a tribe, part of a nation, right? Vance is in support of all of that, and the left now is attacking him on that specifically, and they're attacking him with in the most feminine way possible. They're saying Trump and Vance are weird. And so we're in the situation now where the left seems to be doubling down on their feminine woke DEI shit, where Kamala Harris is this ultimate DEI star. They're completely steeped in delusion. I mean, on one level, Kamala Harris, they're saying that she's black. She's not black. She's the daughter of a Jamaican and an Indian. She grew up in Canada.
Yeah.
She's not a foundational black American. She didn't have anything close to the experience. Her family line has nothing to do with the black experience of America, which is really a deeply American historical thing. It's nothing to do with Kamala, and yet they're under the delusion, operating under the delusion that she is, right? There's one level of delusion. Another level of delusion, they're not attacking Vance on his actual policies. They're just saying he's weird. He's weird. They're trying to appeal to this, this invented sort of high school girl type of
Like Mean
bullying
Girls.
little, and it's just so fake and shallow. But that's what they're going with. Their entire they keep doing this, and they're deluding themselves about the fact that childless cat ladies have some kind of stake in the system. They don't. The reality is that people that are childless, sadly, it's much harder for them to have a stake in the future of the country. It's just a basic reality. And they're deluding themselves. And so what I see from the left is that they're doubling, tripling down on this woke, feminine DEI delusion. And I see at the same time that among the right, there's a faction of very, very powerful elites who are breaking away from the overall massive elites and trying to take the country in a rightward direction. Now, you can disagree with a lot of things that Thiel and Musk are for. For example, Musk, if you're like a conservative, maybe more of a paleoconservative type, there's a lot of things to disagree with Musk, who of course supports Neuralink, and Thiel, who is involved with Palantir, which is a surveillance program. And Ramaswamy and Vance made a lot of their money in biotech. You can have a lot of issues with all those things, right? And Trump, of course, supported the vaccine, right? So I'm not saying that these people are like fucking, they're going to stand up with the fucking cross and the flag, and but they are definitely a different thing than the current left elites, and the current left elites seem to be doubling down with. And I think that's where we are today in America.
Yeah, I tend to look at the kind of the guys backing Trump, and I think there's like a level of, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe they really are just conservative dudes with money and whatever. I mean, that's not unrealistic at all. And I'm not being sarcastic when I say that. I mean, that might just be the case. But I also think that I guess the more I don't know, the more what word am I looking for? Skeptical, pessimistic side of me.
Mm.
I look at it and I go, I think there's a lot of people that are the general feeling is so far on one side simply because it's like you can't afford rent, you can't afford
Yeah.
groceries.
Yeah.
Like we're funding like fucking 85 different wars every like 3 days a week. We're sending off like a new aircraft carrier strike group,
And yet we have mass immigration and diversity hires, you know?
and it's just I think there are probably some very real. I mean, the billionaires are, I would say, above all else, they're probably pretty good at probabilities and risk
Mm,
reward. And I think they're looking at like the general tide is so far. The guy just survived an assassination attempt, like some shit out of a
yeah.
movie. I think they're looking at this and they're like, it's 4 years. It's just one election. Then he's done. He can't run again after that. I think you probably have a bunch of pragmatic dudes who are going, I'm going to throw my money at this. And you probably have a bunch of psychopaths who are just purely for the continual growth of government power. We're looking at like you could ride in on Trump
Mm,
and punch through a bunch of shit that you wouldn't be able to do otherwise.
yeah.
You'd have a bunch of people feel like uh elections do work
Mm,
because you're alienating a half of the country that also a lot of them just went and fought 20 years in the global war on terror. These aren't just, the meal team six dudes who own a shotgun. They're a bunch of dudes that, if push comes to shove, will legitimately run an insurrection and probably kill you. So I think you probably have a bunch of people who are just, yeah, who don't give a they wear they wear the Democrat Republican hat just as convenience. And I think they're probably going like, hey, there's a pretty strong push in one direction. Why triple down fighting against it? Why not just lean in, do some judo, and just get Trump in office? Get Trump in office, all of a sudden, all the funding to all these different countries, it wouldn't be evil Biden. It would be Trump, and it's for America. You'd have a bunch of
mm,
people who are very like disillusioned right now and checking out, maybe buy back in to the entire idea of America. That's what I think. I would like to think they're like legit because as a conservative dude, I would like to think that they're conservative. The more pessimistic side of me says like they're just looking at this as this is where the gradient's pushing,
yeah.
and so they're gonna throw their money on it. Like they don't get
Yeah.
like it's the team is the underdog in March Madness. They're like, I don't give a fuck about St. Joe's. Like I'm putting my money on them. They're fucking bulldozing through March. It's a moment. It's a thing. That's what I tend to think is it's somebody in Vegas throwing money down. They're not letting emotions dictate it. They're just trying to win.
I think you might be right. Um,
I have no idea, and I'm not married to anyone. I don't give a
I
shit.
have some hope in Trump though. You know, I
Oh,
still do.
so do
Just
I.
because
No, I'm with you.
I think that would it really be so bad for people to believe in America again?
Oh,
Even if the billionaires were come along for the ride, you know. I don't know if the rot in America. Look,
let me clarify.
yeah,
It's not even a bad thing that you'd have a bunch of
mm,
pessimistic bill. It's politics is it's just a history of strange bedfellows.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
get over it. Yeah, whatever. Peter Thiel only wants it for this. Whatever. He's on our side. Throw him in.
It'd be nice if we could be realistic again. You know,
Sure.
yeah, that's what I would say. I think that the current regime is just so detached from reality, you know, that it's just disgusting and it's leading us into ruin. You know, and I don't know if they look at Trump and say, "Oh, it's just going to be 4 years," because I think now you have they look at Trump and they say that it's not just going to be 4 years of Trump. After that, it might be 8 years of Vance, and who knows what's going to happen with the democratic system as a whole. There's so many cracks that are appearing in it. The whole thing might shatter. You know, we may end up in a completely different political system in 10 years. It's entirely possible. You know, we'll have to see, but I think there's a lot going on, and I think that really the way that the Democrats are vociferating against Vance, they're not making what you would expect, which is like a move towards the center. You know, the way that happened in the UK with Keir Starmer, who he really toned down a lot of this. You know, a lot of this pro-trans stuff and kind of appealed towards the center, sort of we're going to go back to the, Bill Clinton, Barack Obama type of leftism. And that's kind of more of what I would expect to see from the Democrats right now. But instead, they're going to, they seem to be doubling down with Kamala Harris. They're doubling down with this weird campaign. They're doubling down as well on the entire idea of having a bureaucratic group that leads the country instead of having a man. There, you see, Joe Biden has vacated the office of president effectively, and the Democrats are basically saying, "Yeah, Joe Biden never really made decisions. It was actually this committee of shadowy figures underneath Joe Biden. You're not voting for Joe Biden. You're voting for a team. But Joe Biden doesn't run the country. A committee does, and that's a good thing." That's what the Democrats are saying. I mean, I recall about a year ago where Biden made some comment about Taiwan. I forget the specifics about China and Taiwan. And the day after Biden made those comments, the White House came out with a statement
Yeah.
and said the White House does not support that.
Yeah.
Who the fuck is the White House if it's not Joe Biden? Right?
Yeah, that happened when he was talking about like the 101st in Poland, getting ready to go into Ukraine. He was like, "They're out there."
Right?
Yeah, no, like I think like the DOD the next day was like, "That's not true. That's not accurate."
Yeah. So, in I think the bigger issue that's at stake in this election, quote unquote election, is the idea of managerial, bureaucratic, committee-based democracy, where the media gives the narrative to everybody, and we don't have a singular man, person has to be a man, really, in charge of the country. But instead, you have this shadowy group versus having one person. And of course, this person is subject to powerful interests and shady interests.
Mhm.
Those are not going to go away. That's basic politics forever. But having at the locus of the entire government one person, right? And I think that this is a pretty important distinction, right? Whether we want to go towards the absolute rule of one person or whether we want to go to committee based. It's sort of the path that we're on. And I think that the United States government has always played with both of those, right? We do have the executive branch, which is supposed to be kind of like an electoral monarchy, right? But at the same time, we have this Congress of Parliament. And then at the same time, we have a council of experts in the Supreme Court. We've had all three of those things going on at the same time, and we've tried to have a balance. But now the executive branch has been taken over by the deep state. It's been taken over by these bureaucrats who cross the public-private divide every couple of years. They'll get a job working at ExxonMobil, and they'll get a job working, right? They'll get a job working in Northrop Grumman, then a job working in the Department of Defense. These bureaucrats, I think, are exactly what would lose power relative to the monarch, to the node, the individual Trump. And I think that's really what's at stake on almost more of a ideological, mimetic than right on the ground.
Mhm.
And I think it'll be very interesting to see Trump. He may go in, he may centralize power, and he may not do it for all the ends that conservatives want. He may centralize power and double down on the NSA. He may centralize power and double down on vaccines. It's entirely possible. He may even centralize power and double down on foreign wars, right? I don't think he's necessarily going to do that, not more than the bureaucrats would, but I think that formal distinction is really more so at stake. And for me, I have become so disillusioned by American democracy. The way I see it is that democracy, it should really be inverted. We should call it mediocrity. It's ruled by the media. It's not ruled by the Democrats. So for me, I would say that the best solution, that yes, Trump is a threat to democracy, and that's a good
Didn't write it like a New York Times article. Yeah, and then I mean everything we're talking about, everything that everyone's talking about, it could all just be absolutely shattered by an attack, be it organic or a false flag, that kicks off World War III. Like I don't think that's out of the realm. It's always on the table, but I really don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that like there's a 9/11 coming.
thing.
I
Yeah.
mean, if we look at the amount of, and I don't want it to, but if you look at just the amount of pressures around like if it did happen and you looked back in 50 years and talked about the August 4th, 2024, the day that will live in infamy, If
Yeah.
you look
Yeah.
back, would it be that odd to be like, well, it was 4 years of Trump and then a pandemic and then Russia invaded Ukraine and then Gaza attacked Israel and Israel raised Gaza and then
Yeah.
Iran started buddy. Yeah, no, and then the chapter ends and it starts the new one and it's World War
Yeah.
III and you go, oh yeah, no, I kind of you go home and you go, no, we learned about how it started. No, now I get it.
Yeah.
Same way you look at like
Yeah.
33 to 39 Germany, or you look at
Yeah.
like the powder keg in the Balkans leading up to World War. Doesn't it almost kind of seem like, yeah, and turn the page and we thought we missed it with the bullet
Yeah.
missing Trump, but the reality is it was just around the corner when whatever,
You know, we
Toronto
we
got nuked.
we wake up every morning and we look at our fucking phone and we see the news of the day, the news of the hour, the news of the very
Yeah.
fucking minute, right? And and so then a lot of times we'll go, I have 10 days without any news, and we'll think, oh my God, just psychologically, because we're getting so much of it, we'll
Yeah.
think, wow, nothing is happening, dude. The world is just not changing. Nothing's happening. But then you read a little bit of history and you see shit like, oh, you can clearly see that during this 30-year period, the roots of the decline were setting in already.
Yeah.
Like, oh, it's like, oh, a 30-year period is just like a completion of they're just completing the thing that's already in place. The train is just arriving in the station for
Yeah.
30 years, and it's like, well, if you then take a little bit of a larger view, I mean, God, dude, in the last 8 years, just like you said,
Yeah.
there's been so much that's happened. Historians are going to look back on it and think, yeah, yeah, World War III, 2026, 2024, maybe,
Yeah.
100%. It's fucking scary, man.
It's
So scary.
horrifying. I don't want to be real, but it's just I almost wouldn't be that shocked. Like whenever you look back and I don't know, you see like a Blink 182 album and it's like July
Yeah.
2001 and you're like, "Oh, that's it's right there." Or you just see like an old picture of I don't know, like the Yankees or something and you see like the New York skyline and you're like, "Man, there was only like 5 months
Mm,
left." And there's just like a weird it's like you're screaming and they can't hear you and you're just
yeah.
looking at it, you're like it's right there. Don't be in Lower Manhattan. There is something I don't know. And maybe it's just free floating paranoia. I don't know. But there is just something where it's like, I don't know. It's just so many things moving. It almost doesn't, I almost wouldn't be shocked if you just got like an emergency broadcast and it's like Sacramento's been nuked.
Yeah.
I'd kind of be like,
Sacramento. Yeah.
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 Tell me I feel
Yeah. The
fuck.
North Koreans missed. They were aiming for LA, right?
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
But still, I almost wouldn't be
Yeah.
surprised if you were just
No, I
like,
wouldn't either.
or like a bomb on a cargo ship went off in Miami. You'd be like,
Yeah.
there, there it is.
Yeah. But you know what happened right after that? We'd get press ganged into fucking conscription for war. You know, two of us.
Yeah.
That'd be
No,
pretty dog shit.
I would hope that they would just co-opt my podcast.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's what I'm
You'll be
hoping.
like Dennis Davidoff, right?
That's what I'm hoping. I'm
Guys, this
like,
is why we need to fight for America against Iran. You know,
I'll
click
be
here
a
to
radio
donate.
free. I'll be radio free America. I don't give a shit.
Yeah,
Yeah, no, I don't know. But
sounds
you
like a
know,
better gig than dying in a trench, man. Say
it's a
that much.
1000% a better gig
Yeah,
than dying in a trench. No,
I'll be a
fuck that.
propagandist.
Yeah,
Sign me
I'll
the
be a
fuck up.
propaganda. What are we
Yeah,
doing? Yeah, like fucking, I'll do some like 1940s Disney or not. Yeah, Disney like Donald Duck, fucking do the Hail Hitler or Bugs Bunny dressed up as
yeah.
like
This is the problem with
Hirohito.
democracy, Tommy. Exhibit A.
What?
That's the problem with
Then
democracy,
I'm like, I don't
motherfucker.
give a shit. Yeah, fuck
Yeah.
this. I don't know, man. Do you have Tommy? And I'm gonna give you the fucking. I'm gonna give you the impossible task of now turning this around and ending this on a positive note. How is it? How
Oh
does it
man.
stay?
On a
How does
positive
it?
note, look,
How does it stay positive?
look. I was talking earlier about how we labor under this delusion, or our leaders and the general sort of notions of the ideologies of our country. We labor under this delusion that we live at the end of history, right? As Fukuyama said that and this is something that the Marxists believe, is something that we as capitalists believe, that it's 2024. It's 2024. That means something. That means that we have progress. That means that we're not going back to the way things were back in the ancient days of 1962, okay, before the Civil Rights Act or whatever. That we live somehow as ascended Star Trek beings that just are going to live in a world of democracy and equality and equity and free and fair elections and global trade and individual rights and individualism instead of tribalism and nationalism and imperialism. But the fact is, right, there's that old adage, right, that just keeps on rolling through history, right, that good times create weak men, weak men create hard times create strong men create good times. And when we think of the world as a linear process, we're at the pinnacle of a mountain. We forget that actually the reality might be that there's really cycles going on underneath. And we're actually just rolling through, going down the hill from one hill to the valley, and so we're not going up, we're actually going down. But that also isn't going to be forever, you know. This might be just what's needed to just move history forward cyclically, right? It might be another step towards getting towards that point where the hard times come around and they create strong men. And it's not so much that the hard times will make men strong, but they'll select for the men who are strong and allow for those strong men to achieve success, where in the good times they maybe didn't achieve any more success than anyone else. So it's going to be a lot of opportunities for strong men. So hit the gym, hit the books. You know, it's going to be a good time. It's interesting times that we live.
Yeah, that's how that's how when I actually slow down and try to look at things without emotion. Yeah, we're just in another cycle.
Yeah.
Like this is the next generation, or maybe the youngest generation now, probably are like the next greatest generation. And
oh God, fucking TikTok.
it's a fucking horrible thing to think about. But you got to imagine there's probably a bunch of shitheads running around in like 1920s New York as kids with Babe Ruth jerseys who became like the fucking hardcore Marines on Iwo Jima. I guarantee you there's a bunch of parents right now being like, these fucking kids with their radios and their baseball. And we look back and we're like, no, there's like gods amongst men. They stormed Normandy. It might be. It might be. And regardless, though, is I think above all else, I just try to look at it like remove my ego. Be like, isn't it that's kind of, isn't that convenient that of every human life to have ever lived for however many fucking billions of years, it ends during mine? That doesn't sound a little egocentric. It ends now. It's like, no, it's gonna keep moving forward. Probably in no recognizable form. But I think you're right. I think it's cyclical. For better or worse, I think it's probably just cyclical and it's the machine's just gonna keep just trundling on. I don't know. But yeah, you did a pretty good job of turning that positive. Thank you. I'll give it to you.
That's the nature of cyclical history, man. You know, it's like the Tao, dude. You know, in the darkest moment, there's light. You know, and in the brightest times, there's darkness.
Yeah,
it's the nature of the world.
Keep going forever. Yeah. But for now, I say let's wrap this one up.
Yeah, let's do it. Thanks so much for having me on, Tommy.
Of course, man. Yeah, don't be a stranger. Come on. I tried to get Stolly, but he's on a nocturnal sleep schedule right now, so I couldn't get him to. But yeah, man, let's do it again sometime. I'll send you this episode, and thank you so much for your time, dude.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, brother. Much love, guys. Thank you so much for watching. To me, till